So welcome, English 2393, Section 90, Women's Studies 2393, Section 90 students. I'm going to pick up today's lecture, this week's online lecture, picking up where we left off with modernism, and specifically taking a look more at poets as well, but also we're going to be looking at a prose piece that I guess you could say it might be kind of a prose poem in a way, if you want to. Depends on how you would stretch the definitions there. Just to recap a little bit, modernism at its heart seeks to provide an alternate way of seeing reality that takes as its starting point the idea that reality itself is only understandable on an individual basis in fragments. Remember, we talked about that in class. In discrete units, I should say, or individual experiences. And so as such, the individual poet's perspective is going to be looking at images, elements, slices, pieces of things to try to tease from that or draw out of that larger meanings, or to try to put together experiences into a pastiche or a quilt work of a collection of experiences to try to make sense of reality. Wanted to show you a couple of different things here to give you examples of artwork or design or architecture from that period. Down on the bottom right is the very famous painting from Pablo Picasso, Guernica. It is a piece that was inspired by the bombing of the town of Guernica by the Spanish fascists, who were also supported by Hitler during the Spanish Civil War. And you could see, the expressions, the shock, the horror. This is, of course, an example of an event that made people say, "Oh my gosh, why would they bomb civilians like this? What is going on? Why is this happening?" And again, the modernist tendency to want to make sense out of things, but not being able to do that without a comprehensive view of reality, just individual instances of it. Down at the bottom left, of course, is the famous Persistence of Memory by Salvador Dali, also Spanish. And, of course, he was kind of one of the fathers of the Surrealism movement. People in Hollywood love to use the word surreal to mean what it doesn't mean. Surrealism is about exploring that sort of subconscious state of human awareness, very dreamlike qualities, and it's kind of testing the boundaries of what can be known, what can't be known, how do we know them, through what kind of filter do we know things, and that there's more to our lives than just the experiences that we have. Pardon me. The simplicity of modernist design can also be seen in architecture and furniture, other art forms. This is a Bauhaus home over in the right-hand side. Yep, that's a house. And so straight lines and pieces and elements and geometric forms and shapes are pulled together to make some sense of unity out of sort of abstract individual geometric forms. Additionally, the sofa down there is a classic modernist kind of sofa, kind of a mid-century piece there. Doesn't look terribly comfortable to me. We like big poofy things these days, big, pillow-like things, but they were trying to create sort of clean lines and straight and angles and things and geometric shapes because they were trying to get back to the essentials and elements of design, which they believed to be geometric. Imagism, of course, as we talked about in class, was the most significant poetic movement of modernism, and the writers were really out there trying to experiment with subjects, techniques, forms that challenge the very assumptions about how we construct knowledge out of experiences. Now, that's really important. You have to understand that, or you're not really going to understand the modernist poetry that we're reading. That is to say, again, they are challenging the assumptions of how we construct knowledge. How do you know what you know? How do you know that what you know is true? How do you know that what you know is universal? How do you know that what you know isn't something different from what somebody else knows, and what somebody else knows may be able to change what you know? But the problem is we're all only individuals, so we can't have multiple people's experiences, okay? So we all have a limited experience frame of reference, and so the best you can do is to try to piece that together through reflection, and art helps you do that. So that's a way to understand modernism in short, kind of, sort of, okay? So let's dive right in here and take a look, if we can, at H.D., Hilda Doolittle, okay? Oread, 1915 work, right at the time of the beginning of World War I, not for the U.S., we didn't start till 17, but the rest of the world in the Western world was at war in 1915. And this is a classic Imagist work. Now, what is an Oread? An Oread is a wood nymph, and a nymph is kind of a minor sort of demigod from Greek mythology, so bear that in mind. And we're going to read that now. By the way, it would be great if you want to pause this, get your text out, because I'm going to be talking a lot about individual lines, and there's no way for me to present that on the screen very easily without kind of going back and forth. So if you want to take a moment, pause, go get your text, make sure you got it in front of you as I read along. That way it's a little bit easier on you. Okay, so we're going to take a look at Oread, which is a super short poem here. And what I want you to do is ask, what is the image we're being presented with? And then, of course, after that, we can ask the question, well, what do we think it means? But first we have to figure out, what is she talking about, right? What image is being presented? So Oread reads as follows. Whirl up, sea, whirl your pointed pines, splash your great pines on our rocks. Hurl your green over us, cover us with your pools of fir, F-I-R, okay? Now, look at it again. Whirl up. She is addressing the sea. Okay? Whirl up. Whirl, to whirl like a whirlwind, right? Swishing, whirling. Whirl up, sea. Whirl your pointed pines. Now, I don't know about you, but that's kind of odd. I don't see a lot of pine trees in the ocean. Do you? I mean, kind of a weird thing, right? So I think she's probably not talking about trees out in the sea, in the bay there, offshore, off the beach. So what are they? Well, most people realize that the ocean in some places is very blue, but in some places the ocean is green, right? The sea is green in some places. Well, that would make a lot of sense to say that you know, the sea being green, something about the sea, something coming out of the sea is green, pine green, okay? So what would it be? Whirl your pointed pines, splash your great pines on our rocks. Well, what splashes on rocks? Well, it's got to be waves, right? So she's making a clear comparison here. This is a metaphor. She's using a metaphor here that the green waves of the sea are like pine trees. They're kind of that color. They're pointy, right? They're not big rolling smooth waves. Okay, they're very sharp pointed waves, right? So there's a lot going on. They're splashing up there. There's a sort of a violence to it, a directness to it. Hurl your green over us. Cover us with your pools of fir, as in fir trees, right? Fir trees also green, okay? So this is an interesting kind of question, like what is the comparison here? Well, it's not really a comparison, it's a metaphor, but you get the idea that the figure, the figurative language is describing waves and such of the sea as being green like fir trees or pine trees, and she's actually rooting for the sea to do more of that. I want to see that. I want to see it go up on the shore. I want to see it cover. I want to be covered with this. Now, there's a lot that you can do with that. I don't know. You figure it out. What is she? Is she just interested in seeing something really dramatic, like a nice big storm of waves because it's kind of cool looking? Is this idea of cover us with your waves of pine trees and stuff? Is that some sort of, I don't know, suicidal ideation there? I don't know. A lot of people have talked about it. But I just wanted to show you how an Imagist poem worked, especially a short little one that's quite interesting. I wouldn't say famous, but quite interesting because it's just so compact. It's aiming at a single comparison and a single thing, a single image, and one that you are intended, however you come out with this, to draw some sort of inferences about, like, why would she be rooting for the sea to be violently throwing its waves up over us, covering us? Why? Is there some desire there to experience oblivion, or being wiped out, being covered over with something? What does that seem to indicate? Okay, so you can play with that, see what you think about that. But let's take a look at one that's a little bit longer, Eurydice, which comes 2 years later. And of course, we won't go into all of the mythology about it, but if you know anything about the story of Eurydice, you will remember that Orpheus was her husband, and she dies. She steps on a snake, bites her, dies, goes down to Hades. That's where you're supposed to go when you die if you're in Greece. And Orpheus was the greatest singer, the greatest musician, the greatest performer, of the era, and was so amazing as a musician and singer that he could charm anybody into doing anything. So he persuades Hades himself and his niece bride Persephone, who are the sort of the masters of the underworld, to allow him to come in and bring his wife Eurydice back to life, back out of Hades. And as the story goes, there's several different versions of it, by the way, but this is the big one and the one that I'm sure that Doolittle is drawing on. As the story goes, he goes down into Hades and he begins playing musical instrument. You can any number of different types. Some stories say he was singing, and the rule it was, as long as he does not look back, she will be allowed to follow him all the way back out of Hades into the upper world, into the land of the living. And he gets all the way to the very gates of Hades itself, and she's right behind him. But at the last second, he just doesn't trust it. Maybe he doesn't trust her. Maybe he doesn't trust Hades himself. Maybe he just doesn't believe it. Maybe it's just some sort of perverse desire to just see if he can peek. He peeks, he turns around and looks, and she's sucked back into hell. And that's the end. He can't bring her out. Of course, now you know that people can't come back out of Hades. In Greek mythology, there's a lot of almosts and just abouts, but they never actually make it out. But of course, the lesson is, there is no coming back from the land of the dead. Okay, that's clear in there. But essentially, that's the backdrop of this. Now, is that what Doolittle's poem is about? Well, I mean, it's what's being alluded to throughout. I mean, it's a long allusion to it. But listen to what she does with the poem, and I think you'll see that it serves as a kind of an apt comparison of a relationship she might have had where, well, let's take a look, okay? She's speaking in the voice of someone like Eurydice, or Eurydice herself. It depends on how you want to read it. You can read it and say, oh, she's just giving life to Eurydice. This is therefore a dramatic monologue where the character of Eurydice finally gets to say something about the fact that she almost got rescued out of hell and then got sucked back down into it. Hades, I shouldn't say hell. But you can also read this as the voice of the poet, right? Not a mythological figure, but somebody who's addressing somebody else who seems to have disappointed her in love. Okay? So stanza 1. So you have swept me back, I, who could have walked with the live souls above the earth, I, who could have slept among the live flowers at last. So for your arrogance and your ruthlessness, I am swept back where dead lichens drip dead cinders upon moss of ash. I kind of don't think we're talking about Eurydice, because the story isn't that Orpheus had arrogance and ruthlessness. It was just that he distrusted, right? I don't know. But this is adapting, I think, the story of Eurydice and Orpheus to the poet's purposes in complaining about a lover who almost brought her back to life and then dashed her hopes. Brought her back to life in what way? Maybe she was sad. Maybe she had already experienced disappointment in love, and this guy was going to come along and rescue her from that, only to meet with her disappointment in him because he was a jerk. So for your arrogance, I am broken at last, I who lived unconscious, who was almost forgot. Right? If you had let me wait, I had grown from listlessness into peace. If you had let me rest with the dead, I had forgot you and the past. Oh, so maybe this is someone coming back to say, give me a second chance. I know I disappointed you earlier, but this time I mean it, kind of thing. I don't know. You decide, right? I'm not trying to force a particular interpretation on you, but it's very clear that the voice we're hearing here is someone who says, I'd have been better off if you just left me alone. But to bring me back and give me hopes that this would have worked out, was going to work out, and then to find out, no, because you ruined it, etc. So why did you turn your back that hell should be re-inhabited? Of my feet, I'm skipping around here, of myself thus swept into nothingness. Why did you turn? Why did you glance back? Why did you hesitate for that moment? Why did you bend your face, caught with the flame of the upper earth above my face? What was it that crossed my face with the light from yours and your glance? What was it you saw in my face? Okay. So here we are. You had convinced me. I'm gonna cheer you up. We're gonna revitalize our relationship. We're gonna start all over, and then you ruined it again, second time, right? Why didn't you just leave me alone? And then she says, why did you turn back? Why did you turn back? Right? And the turning back, of course, of Orpheus is what pulls her back into what pulls Eurydice back into Hades. In the case of this relationship, how might he be said to have turned around and looked at her? That hell should be re-inhabited. What was it that crossed my face? When you did that, what did you see in my face? What did you see? With the light from yours and your glance, what was it you saw in my face? Right? She doesn't tell us, but you can only use your imagination. The light of your face, the fire of your own presence, question mark. Did you see my admiration for you, my love for you, my bond with you? That would be the last thing you saw of me, was my hope in you, and you blew it, right? You threw it away. Skipping down to stanza 3, saffron from the fringe of the earth, wild saffron that has bent over the large edge of earth. All the flowers that cut through the earth, all the flowers are lost. Everything is lost. Everything is crossed with black, black upon black, and worse than black, this colorless light. So she's been pulled back down. She was looking forward to experiencing life again. You were there. You said you would bring me out of this depression, this darkness, and then you blew it. Through your arrogance, through your ruthlessness, whatever, you blew it because you threw it all away. You trashed it. You did something stupid. We don't know what. But now I will never experience the flowers, the color. And by the way, that's being set up here. A lot of imagism stuff going on in here. The colors, the flowers. It's very, very, very significant in the poem, okay, that she talks about, as opposed to the darkness, etc. Skipping down to part of stanza 4. If I could have caught up from the earth the whole of the flowers of the earth, if once I could have breathed into myself the very golden crocuses and the red and the very golden hearts of the first saffron, the whole of the golden mass and the whole of the great fragrance, I could have dared the loss, right? If I'd actually made it up there to the land of the living to experience what the poet really loves, which is flowers and fragrance of flowers, right? And you can see that as being kind of a figurative thing, right? Meaning the richness of physicality and the world and the senses. Okay, so for this poet, those flowers and the fragrance and the colors of the flowers represent the vitality of life. Of course, in Greek mythology, Hades was this bland, colorless place, a land of shadows and insubstantiality. But the real world, it had real flowers and beautiful colors and great smells and things of this nature. And she says, if I had only had, if I could have just had a few minutes of that, that would have been good, right? So for your arrogance and your ruthlessness, I have lost the earth and the flowers of the earth and the live souls above the earth. And you who passed across the light and reached ruthless, you who have your own light, who are to yourself a presence, who need no presence, whoever this person is, the sense here is that he's rather narcissistic. You have your own light, right? Yet for all your arrogance and your glance, I tell you this, such loss is no loss. Such terror, such coils and strands and pitfalls of blackness, such terror is no loss. Hell is no worse than your earth. Above the earth, hell is no worse. No, nor your flowers, nor your veins of light, nor your presence a loss. My hell is no worse than yours, though you pass among the flowers and speak with the sprites above the earth. I think we have to ask ourselves whether this is defensiveness or if she genuinely means it. My life is no worse than yours down here. You walk around the real world and you get to experience all the things of life and the colors and the beauty and the passion and the other souls and the other people. And I'm down here by myself, but you don't have it any better off than I do because you are a shallow person, are guilt-ridden. I don't know. You have to decide whether you think that she's simply being defensive and rationalizing with herself or whether she truly believes that. I don't know. Skipping down to the last stanza here. I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep us on time. At least I have the flowers of myself and my thoughts No God can take that. I have my memory of that. I have the flowers of myself. I have the fervor of myself for a presence, and my own spirit for light. Again, does she really believe this, or is she just kind of rationalizing because he's enjoying his life and she's in misery and in Hades because of, they're not being together and his disappointing her? I'm assuming it's a his. She was married to a man for many years before she had a relationship with a woman, and this is early enough in that. I don't know. We'll see. Decide for yourself. And my spirit with its loss knows this, though small against the black, small against the formless rocks, hell must break before I am lost. Before I am lost, hell must open like a red rose for the dead to pass. I'm not lost. I'm not lonely. I'm not by myself. I'm not in despair, because I have myself, and I have my memories, and I have my own intellect and my own personality. I don't know whether to believe her or not. I don't know. You decide. That's my favorite phrase, I know, but you decide. But it almost sounds as though it's a person who is trying to convince herself that she's not hurt fatally. You've hurt me really badly, but I still have me, and I'd rather be me than you, even though you're up there enjoying champagne and caviar and limo rides to rave concerts or whatever people do. No one raves anymore. But me, I realize I'm down here in this faceless, nameless, colorless place with nothing but, frozen pizza, not real pizza. And you're really enjoying life, but you're not really enjoying life. You just think you are. And I'm not really miserable because I have me and I have my integrity. Okay, we'll see. I don't know. You decide, as I say. All right. Anyway, make of that poem what you will, but it's quite an interesting piece because it does several things. It's kind of operating on lots of different levels, and you kind of have to decide, what do you think of the voice in the poem? What do you think her true sentiment is? We hear what she says. Is what she says what she's really feeling? I don't know. I'm a little suspicious. Let's take a quick look at Miss Fur and Miss Skeen. And boy, people have such weird reactions to this piece. I love this piece because it's so... I won't say I love this piece. I find it fascinating. Okay. First, a word about liver and onions. Okay. So I have no idea why, but I have to say that when I was a kid, my parents made me eat liver and onions, and I didn't like liver and onions, and nobody really does. We just eat it because I don't know what. Maybe somebody does like liver and onions. So the reason I'm bringing that up is it's supposed to be good for you. And I'm sure it is. It's supposed to be nutritious. It's supposed to really be something that's good for the body. I think every now and then there are literary works where we don't actually like the taste of them or the flavor of them, but what's in them is actually pretty good. It's pretty interesting if you let it be, right? If you try. Probably a terrible comparison on my part, but I can't help but think of when I read works like this to say, it's not my choice to eat liver and onions. But I do understand sometimes that it's quite good for you, and it makes you, it's good for your body. A work like this is good for your mind. I think it really kind of gives you some sort of stimulus there that's kind of important for you. What are its elements? Well, obviously repetition is the number one. Repetition, regularly repetitive, and they were repetitive, and then they repeated because they were repetitive. Oh my gosh, put a gun to my head and shoot me. After a while, you're beginning to cultivate, pleasant, gay, cultivate, pleasant, gay, etc. So transformative use of words and phrases, your head note says we don't know that this is the first use of the term gay to mean someone who is same-sex attracted, whether the word was around before then or not. Oh, it certainly was. That's not the issue. This is the work that really made it sort of make, as a term meaning just describing someone who is same-sex attracted. This is the work that made it hit mainstream, where people started saying, oh, that's what you mean by gay, right? So it had that effect, although the word gay is, who knows how old that is? I don't know, probably quite old. I think at least back to the Victorian period, but you guys can go look that up. The narrative kind of loops back around again and again, retreading old ground. Okay, so what makes that modernist? Well, what makes it modernist is, again, the idea of the piece tries to make sense of experiences. okay? And it does so by sort of looping back around and restating things. And you say, well, that's just so horribly redundant. It drives me nuts. I understand that, but the writer is trying to get at truth by writing and rewriting and rewriting, because it's all you have as an. Have you ever had a bad conversation with someone and you relive it over and over in your mind, or you may relive it and retell it to somebody else over and over and over again? Because the purpose is not simply to narrate the exact events as they happened. What you're trying to do is you're trying to make that unpleasant encounter make sense. Like, why did that happen? What was going on? I'm trying to make sense of it in my mind. And she's just doing that on paper, like her relationship, which was very, very unusual, okay, for that time, to be an openly and out lesbian woman at that time, was just kind of unheard of in many respects. So going to your head note a little bit, Stein, of course, was a major figure, and she lived in Paris, and Paris became this real nucleus, this real hub of modernist writers and painters and poets and whatnot. There were modernist writers in the United States, but Paris, especially after the war, was ground zero for this. And so they would hang out at Shakespeare and Company. They would hang out at the cafes, the whole cafe scene. Hemingway and Fitzgerald and Ezra Pound and all these people would come and visit Stein. And Stein would sort of be like the grande dame of modernism in Paris. And that was her apartment there. And she lived with Alice B. Toklas. That's her on the left. Alice B. Toklas. Stein's on the right. Down on the bottom picture, it's reversed. Stein on the right. Stein on the left. Toklas on the right. For many years, and everyone knew about their relationship. But that apartment right there was where she really sort of held court. And everybody who was a young writer, including say a Hemingway, she would give them advice on how to write and everything. And it was a huge thing to be within that circle of writers and painters and musicians and artists and all kinds of things, okay? Designers and architects, and they all kind of hung out at Stein's place, and that was the place to go and live. So she's engaging in a kind of sort of spoken poem here, if you will. It's almost stream of consciousness. Not quite stream of consciousness, but it's almost in some ways, because it involves the repetition and sort of a sense of, I wouldn't say randomness. Some people will say, oh, it's so random. It's not random. It's repetitive. That's quite different. Random is just kind of off all over the place. Random is this sort of chewing and chewing again and rechewing, kind of like liver, because it's pretty tough, and trying to make sense of it. The best I can say is trying to make sense of an episode, like I said, that was something that you remember. You're trying to figure out what did all that mean? Why did I have that conversation? Why did I have that argument? And reliving it in your mind over and over and over again. In this case, it's not something traumatic. It's her life story, but she's trying to, or the story of her adult life. She's trying to relive that and explain it to herself. And you also have to ask this question: what must it have been like to be gay at that time and not understand why you were, right? Because your whole society was telling you, this is not normal, this is not right, you're an aberration of some sort. And to be an adult and to be living that lifestyle and trying to come to terms with that would have been a very difficult thing to do, you see. So not just one aspect, but many aspects of a person's life is something we try to make sense out of. Who am I and why am I? And why have I lived how I have lived? Why have things happened to me as they have? How did I get where I am? And the attempt of sort of starting and stopping and retreading, etc. So we ask ourselves, why all of these? What was she hoping to accomplish? What artistic benefit does all this looping and stuff serve? I think this retreading and repetition is a desire to kind of try to make it fit into something cognitively that makes sense, when that's a very difficult thing to do and challenging thing to do for any of us, not just her. So remember that modernism is replicating the experience of living and trying to know, okay? Cognition itself is often being explored in modernist works. She does with words what someone handling or fondling an object of interest would do in turning it over and over, looking at it from multiple angles, or the same angle repeatedly, trying to get to know it, to understand it as fully as possible. So here's this thing, and I can't quite figure it out. And I look at it from many different angles, you see. And so life can be that way, right? How did I get to be who I am? How did I get to be where I am? What am I doing with my life? What are the people around me? What is my relationship to them? And it's a continual process of trying to come to terms with that. Anyway, it's I bet you've never read anything like it. Some people love this. Some people hate it. Some people say, it could have been done in about 3 paragraphs. All right. Liver and onions, whatever you think. Okay. But it darn sure is interesting to a certain extent. Okay. All right. So I have a quiz here for us and an announcement. Let me jump to the quiz. One, why is Eurydice pulled back into Hades? What happens? What is the catalyst for that? Okay. Not in the poem, in the myth we talked about. And what was the city, the hub of modernist activity, wherein Stein frequently hosted gatherings? If you were paying attention, you would have heard that. Okay. A quick announcement is, you'll notice that on the schedule, we have something scheduled for this coming week, and that is that we have a no class. That is because I was all set to go to Orlando for the NCHC, and I'm not going after all now. Okay, so we aren't going to have official class. You do not have to show up. However, I am going to come to class at the top of the hour, 1 o'clock on Thursday, with all of the remaining graded material that I'm going to be able to hand back to you. Now, if you don't want to come, you don't have to, but I'm going to bring all the midterms and the papers graded and any quizzes graded with me, and I'll distribute them to the people who are there. Okay. The other thing that you might consider doing is, because we don't have class that day, but it's 1 hour and a half that all of us have, where that everybody can be there, you might decide you want your team film scene group to meet at that hour, and you certainly can do that, and you can use our classroom to do that. So, are you required to be there on Thursday? No. If you want to be there on Thursday, or your group wants to use the room on Thursday, you absolutely can. It's a great time to have a meeting of your team. Stay in touch with each other, organize that. If you simply want to show up and grab your graded midterm and paper from me, you can do that too. Okay. Speaking of the paper, I have booted it back a few days. Okay. It is no longer due on the week after the 28th, which I think would probably be like the 2nd. I'm booted it one more week to the 9th, November 9th. And I will post that assignment in Canvas just as soon as I get it written up. Okay. All right. Very good. Let's get your, and there will be a discussion question in Canvas as well. If you'll do your discussion question and your quiz, get them to me by Tuesday at midnight, this coming Tuesday at midnight. Thursday, no formal class, but if you want to show up and get your graded material, I'll be there for about 15 or 20 minutes. If your group wants to meet to work on your film assignment, that would be a smart thing to do if you can do it. Okay? See you in class. Actually, I won't see you in class unless you show up, right? Because it's voluntary. But for those who are there, I will see you.